It is always a pleasure when we can have legends join us in the studio to talk sports, and today I have the honor of welcoming a guest who is fresh off of an induction into the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Fame. He is one of the hosts of The Odd Couple on Fox Sports Radio, the founder of MLBBro.com, representing Jamaica, Queens, the one and only legendary sports journalist, my guy, Rob Parker. Rob, how you doing, man?
Dex, man, thank you. Thanks for having me, man. This is awesome.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure.
I've admired your work from afar, so this is very nice.
This coming from you is truly an honor, man, like truly an honor. I really appreciate that you would, say that you admire my work. But look, I've admired your work for quite some time. So we're going to talk to Rob about a bunch of things, including the fact that he recently got inducted to the NABJ Hall of Fame. And I got to ask you this, Rob, considering all that you've done in your career as a sports journalist, as long as you've done it, what did it mean to you to be inducted into the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Fame?
It was a special moment. It really was, to be honored by your own people, your peers, and they look at your body of work. I've been doing this for 37 years. Started in newspapers, moved to television, radio. I teach at USC. I mentor a lot of people. So somebody to take a look at your career, put it all together and say you're worthy of a Hall of Fame, have a big ceremony and all your friends and family and colleagues and peers are there. It was very special. In Birmingham, Alabama, the first time I've ever been there. So it was a great time.
No, I'm glad that you saw that and glad you got that honor. We saw so much love on social media for Rob and him being honored. And Rob, I want to talk to you about your career because you said it's been a long career. And when you look at your career, you were the first black columnist at a lot of places, right? I think it was Detroit Free Press, Newsday here in New York. When you think about being the first sometimes, I think a lot of people champion that, but we also don't think about how difficult that can be sometimes. What was being the first at all these places, all these outlets, the first black columnist? What was that like for you?
Yeah, like at the Detroit Free Press, the paper when it hired me was 161 years old. They had never had a black man have a sports column in the paper. Just think about that in Detroit, where it's 85% black. So people, when I got to town, they embraced me. They loved to see somebody who looked like them and had some opinions that they had. Not all, but you know how it is. It was a breath of fresh air, and they bonded quickly with me. And I wound up representing the city, and they wanted to claim me, and they did, as one of their own, which is, high praise coming from people when they know you're not from, I'm from New York,
right. Come
to Detroit, and they're like, yo, you're one of us now, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that was great. The first black sports columnist at Newsday, same thing. It sounds crazy, New York, and they didn't have a black sports columnist till 1995, but just think about that, 1995.
Right.
So again, to come home to New York, to do it in my hometown, and to have my picture in the paper, and for people to look and see who I went to high school with, friends, family, it was a big deal to do it in New York. And then in Cincinnati before that, I was the first black baseball beat writer at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and I covered the Reds. Again, a baseball beat. The Cincinnati Reds are the first professional franchise in this country, so it has a lot of history and tradition, and to be able to cover that team as well. So all those things happened. I was fortunate, and you know what I mean, there was always a rough road. You had to prove yourself, and people, can you handle this, can you do it? And I was always up for the challenge, and I was happy that they gave me the opportunity and believed in me, and I felt like I was up to the challenge.
Yeah, well, you more than were up to the challenge, and you've obviously proven that throughout your career. But when you talk about being the first, Rob, it also makes you realize, as you mentioned, there's just a lack of diversity, right? And we're still seeing that in sports journalism. You look at the numbers around diversity in newsrooms and the people who are making the decisions, the numbers are still very low. And you've obviously had a lot of efforts in trying to change that. So when you look at where sports journalism is, and you look at the low amounts of black and brown folks in the space, are you encouraged that things can be better? Are you encouraged there can be changes with diversity in sports journalism?
There have been changes. I mean, we should just, Dex, think about it.
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith, who's from Hollis, Queens, is the face of ESPN. Just think about that. And the highest paid guy in his business. He's our modern day Howard Cosell. Let's just call it what it is. Think about that. So there are people who have ascended to those kind of positions. Do we need more? Absolutely, we need more and more opportunity and more situations. I had a situation in Detroit. I was writing a column for Deadspin at the time, and Detroit, again, when they started the first all-sports station in Detroit, WDFN, I was the first on-air person they ever hired. This is back in 1994. So here we are in 2021 or 2020. They didn't have one black person on an all-sports station in Detroit. Just think about that again. 85% black, 2020, 2021, you don't have one black voice, a different opinion,
right,
on the station. I wrote this column, I exposed the whole station for what was going on there. And you know what, Dex? They hired a brother 3 weeks later. And they answered my criticism of the station. And all I'm saying is, you gotta diversify, you gotta hear different people. It would be like being in New York and not having different voices and different people. I mean, this is the ultimate melting pot. And New York has work to do too, but I'm saying you can't do that. And I think people need to call out organizations that don't have diversity.
I do agree, and I think that's important. I think it's important when we talk about diversity too, Rob, that it's not just the people who are writing or the faces too, it's the people who are editors and producers and behind the scenes and those
and bosses and people who are making the decisions, the shot callers.
That matters. Now you talk about making decisions and being a shot caller and making change in your own way. You've done that yourself. You're the founder of MLBBro.com. It's a great site. Everybody should check that out. It tells you about the latest news surrounding black and brown baseball players. Talk to me about the inspiration to start MLBBro.com and where you see that going.
I'm a baseball Hall of Fame voter. I'm a BBWAA member. I have been since 1990. When you get your baseball writer's card, it tells you what number you are. So you start out, and I think I was 569. I'm now number 70. So that means that's how much I've moved up since I first got my card in 1990. So that means only 69 other writers have covered as much baseball as me in the entire country. So I just saw there was a lack of diversity in the press box, And I thought to myself, black players are also underrepresented. Not that they're not covered for things that they do on the field or whatever, but we don't really know who they are, their past, their stories. So I came up with the idea of MLBBro.com, work with J.R. Gamble, who's the managing editor, another guy from Queens, Mark Gray, who is a baseball guy down in Washington, D.C. We came together, put it together, and we started this 3 years ago. This is our third season. Started with 14 people on this site. We're up to 62 people who now do social media, videos, write stories, young guys in college, young writers who are trying to learn the game, women, the whole gamut. And the best part was baseball monitored our site the first 2 years, and then this year joined in a partnership. So now we have a higher profile, and we're on their platforms. So some of our videos are now on MLB Network. Yeah. Some of our stories run on MLB.com. Some of our social media is retweeted by MLB. It's just an amazing thing. We were at the All-Star game in Seattle.
I saw that.
We had 5 staffers there. It's hard to get 5 credentials for an All-Star game.
Yeah, it is.
And baseball understands what we're doing, and they also love not just us covering black players and highlighting them, but they also wanted to be involved to change the look of the press box and the whole idea of having diversity and different voices and different people covering the game. So it's a beautiful thing.
No, absolutely. It's a beautiful thing that you're doing with MLBBro.com. And when you talk about changing the look of the press box, right, and making it more diverse, we also have to look at on the field, on the baseball field. And this is for the second straight year, the data around the amount of black players on opening day rosters at an all-time low. 6.2% this year on opening day. It was 7.2% the year before. I got to ask you this. Why do you think it's been so low? Why has the number of black players participating in the major leagues, why has that number been declining?
I'm going to say this. First, they are coming. The minor leagues has a ton of black players who are on their way up. Just the last draft, not this past one, the one before, 3 of the top 5 players drafted were black. First time in the history of baseball that 3 of the top 5 players drafted were black. So there is movement. But the reason I think is a couple things. About 15, 20 years ago, baseball outsourced the jobs. They went to Latin America and they set up academies where they could get kids young, give their parents minimal amount of money as the initial investment, put them in dormitories, give them 3 meals a day, and have them play ball all day. And then when they blossom, baseball will pay you once you become a star. They don't care what color you are, where you're from. If you could play, they're going to pay you. But that was because they had paid money to kids in this country who flopped, who didn't make it. So this was their way of not making the investment up front, you know what I mean? But after you kind of make it. The other thing in the black community to me was the rise of AAU sports, basketball, football coaches who are telling kids you can only play one sport. It's got to be basketball, 365, 24/7, football. You can't run track. You can't play baseball. So kids, you're watching it. Sure, you see a kid 1 year and then they get to go to the NBA. They're not in the minor leagues. You're in college football. You play for 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? And you're in the pro. Baseball, you could be really good. You still might have to go to the minors. Might be 2 or 3 years. There's more steps.
Right, more steps you might have to go through.
And so a lot of kids put all their eggs in the basket for those sports, and unfortunately, they don't all make it. As you know, in the NBA draft, there's only 30 fully guaranteed contracts in the NBA every year, and 10 of those are from foreign players. So it's like 20 jobs, and so all these kids are pouring into that. I think that's changing now. With the CTE and all the information we know about football players, a lot of moms don't want kids to play. You're going to see a switch and a shift. And I'm telling you, if you check the minor leagues, there are brothers everywhere.
So you said it's increasing in the minor leagues. Do you think there is a solution, Rob, or is it some of what you're just talking about, not maybe having the specialization in sports as kids just playing one sport? What do you think is the solution to increasing black participation?
That's really down to that. That's really it, because all the greatest players that we know, think about Michael Jordan played baseball. Deion Sanders, Hall of Famer in football, played baseball. I could go on. And this is not just, well, that's old school and that was before, right? Kyler Murray was the first player ever drafted in the NBA, in the NFL in the first round, and drafted in baseball first round. That didn't happen 40 years ago. That happened 3-4 years ago.
Right.
So you can play more than one sport. Those coaches are selfish, and they're the ones who are denying kids. You might be able to play baseball and basketball, and you don't make it to the NBA. There's still an option. You go to the minor leagues if you have the talent. So these kids have cut off and put everything into all their eggs in one basket. And a lot of these kids wind up on the outside looking in.
Yeah, they do. And specialization around youth sports is always a very interesting topic. I want to ask you about New York baseball, being that you're a New Yorker, I'm a New Yorker, we're both New Yorkers, okay? The Mets, we just saw them sell off a bunch of pieces at the deadline. The Yankees didn't do much at the deadline. Their offense has been putrid, to be nice to Yankee fans there. Does New York baseball excite you right now? Have you been excited about New York baseball?
Well, I think the Mets did the right thing, to be honest. I mean, sometimes people want to save face, and they want to not admit that it didn't work out, and they would just hold on to people for no reason. I think they did the right thing. I like what they did, because you weren't winning anything. Once you fell out of it, you had to determine to yourself, this is not going to work, so let's just move on. So that was good. The Yankees, I was surprised at how little they did, but they're still in the race. They're not out of it by any stretch of the imagination. I still think they have a chance to make it. Judge being out all that time really hurt. Then you know the difference. That's why I say he is the epitome of an MVP. Because when he's in that Yankee lineup, it's a totally different team to when he's not. That's how much impact he has of the other players. So, it's been a long time, a long drought. Yankees haven't won since Moby Dick was a guppy. It's been a long time. That was, 2009?
Yeah.
And we won't get into the Mets. Is how long. At least they've been to the World Series.
They've been since 2015. The Mets have been there. So New York baseball hasn't been so exciting right now.
No.
I want to ask you about Shohei Ohtani, because I love watching Shohei Ohtani, right? He's just so amazing. He can pitch, he can hit. It's just amazing. Do you think two questions here. Do you think he's the best player in the sport? And do you think either the Mets or Yankees should make a run at him this offseason?
I think he is the best player right now. I mean, it's hard to not think that, when you have a guy who can pitch at that level, and then now he's hitting home runs, he's batting over 300, because he wasn't hit over 300 his first few years. Now he's even a better hitter. And, but I think they should, the Mets and Yankees. He needs to wind up in a big market on a big platform. You remember when Hideki Matsui was in the Bronx,
yeah.
and he became a legendary, he was already a legendary figure in Japan, Godzilla. And you remember the Yankees had all those Japanese ads all over the stadium. If Ohtani were to come to the Yankees or the Mets, I think the Mets are probably out now because of what happened with the money they spent. They had the highest payroll ever. They look like they're going the other way for a little bit. Ohtani, I don't think, is trying to rebuild or do anything like that, where I think the Yankees are definitely always in the mix. So I think it will wind up being the Yankees or the Dodgers is where Ohtani will wind up. I think one of those two teams.
All right, Yankee fans could be happy about that. Could see Ohtani in pinstripes. Now, at the moment that we're recording this, there's plenty of baseball to go. We're here in early August. Who do you think is the team that's going to win the World Series? Who do you look at right now and say they're the best team in baseball? They're going to win the World Series?
Man, yeah. I mean...
Putting you in the hot seat, Rob. Putting you in the hot seat.
I'm trying to think. Because there are a couple teams... I think, you look at where Baltimore is. I mean, everybody's been waiting for them to fall off. They're not falling off.
They're not. They're playing well.
They're playing well. They're a really good team. So Baltimore's in the mix. Also, I mean, I think I picked the Texas Rangers to come out of the American League. So I'm going to stick with the Texas Rangers. Even without DeGrom, they're still hanging in there, which speaks a lot when he was supposed to be your number one guy. So I would say that. And then in the National League, you look at the Atlanta Braves, hard to not like them. They pitch, they hit, they got young players. They're doing a lot. So
it's tough.
It is, but I'm going to go off the grid.
Okay,
here.
Going off the grid. Okay.
I'm going to pick a team that's not even secured a playoff spot. The San Diego Padres. The Padres... I like the Padres against the Rangers. How's that for a World Series?
Padres, Rangers, World Series, and you got the Padres coming out on top. That's what I'm hearing. You got the Padres coming out on top. Okay, you heard it. That's Rob Parker's prediction here. Last thing before I let you go, and I really appreciate the time. Before your Hall of Fame induction into the NABJ, I saw a video that you posted on Twitter where there were so many young people, so many young journalists thanking you for what you've done in their careers, how you've helped them. So many journalists of color in that group as well, too. So I got to ask you this. You just got inducted into the Hall of Fame. I'm sure you sit and think back and reflect on certain things in your career. What is Rob Parker's legacy? How do you view your legacy and what you've done in this game as a sports journalist?
You know, when I think about my legacy, I don't think about, like, my accomplishments. We talked about it earlier. You know, the first black sports columnist at the Free Press in Detroit, first black sports columnist at Newsday, the first black baseball beat writer with the Cincinnati Reds for the Cincinnati Enquirer. But it's really about those guys and girls who I've helped along the way. That to me is the real legacy on where you could help to elevate people. I mean, you could ask Stephen A. and tell the story when I first met Stephen A. in 1992 at the NABJ convention in Detroit. And he's somebody that I had to talk off a ledge once. He was going to quit the business because he wasn't getting that opportunity. And I would refuse to allow him. He had an application to go work at Wachovia Bank. I made him rip up the application over the phone. Dex, I said, you got to rip it up. You can't go work at Wachovia. Can you imagine Steve yelling at people at the bank? Fill out that deposit ticket.
I can't.
You know what I mean, or whatever. But anyway, I'm not taking credit for his career. He's a tremendous broadcaster and sports commentator. But things like that, when I see guys like him and Mark Spears and a guy we both know, Darren Haynes, who's leaving D.C. to become a sportscaster in L.A., when I see those guys and I remember their humble beginnings and how they've built their careers, those are the things that I'm most proud of.
No, you should absolutely be proud. And I want to say, as we wrap up, that obviously it means a lot for me as a black journalist to see you from New York. We're both from New York. You from Queens. I'm from Brooklyn. I know what it meant to see someone like you do what you did in this space. And so to be able to talk to you and have this conversation means a lot, Rob. Thank you, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On the induction into the Hall of Fame. Really salute you. Enjoy it. I know you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to do much great work going down. That is Rob Parker. Check him out on The Odd Couple, his radio show with Chris Bouchard on Fox Sports Radio. Rob, we'll do this again soon. Thank you, man.
No doubt. Thank you so much.
All right. Till next time, guys, another great interview. Peace.